Well, good morning.
Good morning.
How are we today? Good. So, after a long, wild night of spring break drinking, 3 college girls awakened in a Florida jail cell. And they had no recollection of what crime they had committed to be there. And as they strained to recall the night before, a jailer opened the cell door, led them down a hall to a room in which there was an electric chair. And as they strapped the first girl in, she said, "As a theology major, I have faith that somehow I will be saved from this cruel death." And they flipped the electric chair switch, and nothing happened. So they let her go. And as they strapped the second girl in, she said, "As a criminal justice major, I maintain that somehow I will be released from this injustice." And again, they flipped the switch, and again, nothing happened. So they let her go. And as they strapped the third girl in, she said, "As an engineering major, I'm amazed that nobody has thought to check the power outlet. This thing's not even plugged in." Well, I thought of that while I was working on my sermon for this week. It popped into my head because the electric chair popped up. I was like, oh yeah, I'll tell the electric chair story. So keep an ear open for that, because there's a lot of danger and there's a lot of ways to get hurt in this sermon. But the electric chair is not the silliest of them, or even the most dangerous. Welcome to this place which we make holy by our presence. These doors are open to all. We welcome diverse ideas about the source of life, diverse needs, diverse abilities. Bring your brokenness and your personal glow. Bring your fatigue and your energy, vulnerabilities and strengths, loves and hopes, fears and anxieties. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, where the human is celebrated, where compassion is strength. Welcome to this place. Together we make it a holy place. Please join me for the words of the chalice lighting, which are printed on the inside of your leaflet. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, bless and not to curse, serve you, Spirit of freedom. Now please stand if you are able for our first hymn, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. It is hymn 361 in the hymnal.
Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in.
Instead of a responsive reading today, we are going to do a celebration of sacred water. In churches around the United States, this morning while we're here, people are transforming wine into the blood of Jesus by means of a miracle that's called transubstantiation. Transubstantiation, that is the transformation of one substance into another substance. And we're going to keep that in mind today because we have a long-running tradition of, on the second Sunday in September, bringing in some water from some water source that is sacred to us, which could be a well or a river or a lake or an ocean or even just your kitchen sink or the kitchen sink of some place that you grew up, whatever. And for today, I know that not all of us brought some water from a sacred source, but I invite you to transubstantiate. Some of the water from this container into some of the water from a water source that is very important to you. And please think about it. Come up one at a time. Just briefly introduce what water you're transforming this into. And then pour a little bit into this container here. I'm going to get us started. This last summer, I took my children to Allegheny State Park, and we had some really nice times just playing in a creek there. I would like to share some of the creek water from Allegheny State Park.
Okay, I'm going to share some water that came from Cayuga Lake in the Finger Lakes. That's where I grew up. Beautiful place near Ithaca, New York.
Okay, so I don't think we went anywhere near water this year, but yesterday, Bill did a water test on our kitchen faucet. We have no lead, and everything was perfect. So I'm putting that water in here.
I went on the Maid of the Mist twice this summer, once after my father's memorial, my parents' memorial service, with relatives I don't get to see very often. Several of my nieces came and my cousin from Colorado and his son. And it was just so much fun to watch them as adults. They had not been there in so many years, just watch the awe on their face. And then I did it again, and we went in the Cave of the Winds with my staff. It was our last outing because I'm going to be transferring the practice this year. So it was our last outing together, and it was just so much fun watching them get soaked and just be so amazed by the water coming down from the falls.
I also have some water in that container that we lost this, probably the last few months by having a leak in a toilet upstairs. And we lost it, and we should have picked it up quicker, but it ended up costing the church a couple $100 at least because of that water leak. And we're going to not do that anymore, and I'm recovering as much of it as I can from this container here.
Well, for the last 14 years, when my grandchildren were very, very young, we were going to Sunset Bay. It's about on Lake Erie, about a half hour south of Buffalo. And now they're not so young, but they still want to come.
I love water. I love being by lakes, rivers, and oceans. And I think in this area, we are just so blessed to be surrounded by beautiful bodies of water and a river. And I think we should remember that when the frozen water comes down in December and January. And at least I'll try not to whine so much about it.
It's all right. Just in case there's anyone here that would like to do one from their seat, and I'll pour it for you. Is there anyone else who would like to? All right. Well, I'm going to pour one last bit in for the rest of us who haven't thought of something or are too shy to share this morning. And I'm also going to magically transform this into that water jar that we've been pouring water into for every water service for the last some number of years. Betsy told me the jar was going to be under the kitchen sink. I thought, why? But I looked, I didn't find it, so I put some water into this one. So we can all just take a moment and pretend that this is the long traditional water jar from this service. I guess I should say we have a tradition of doing the water service. We also have a tradition of announcing the water service, remembering the water service, and but we're kind of a non-traditional people here, so we're doing a little bit different this time. All right, and either we're gonna sing a song, or we're going to move to the next part of the service, which is the honoring of joys and concerns. And this is a little bit different. This is a time in the service when it might look a little bit like the other part, except that's a water thing. This is a fire thing. We are invited, if there is some special joy from this last week, this last year, or this last summer, or some sorrow, concern, anxiety, you're invited to come up and say a few words about it, or not say a few words about it, and light a candle and stand it up in this receptacle. I know, a receptacle that used to be a carrier of sacred water, and now what was a baptismal font is a site of sand and fire. So that's how we use it today. What? That's right, yes. Another example of transubstantiation. If anyone has a joy or concern that they would like to share, please do. Yes, please. And you're welcome to come up. If you'd like to share it from here, you're welcome to do that.
I will. Am I being heard?
Yes.
You can hear me. So my concern this morning is I have not heard almost anything. I don't know if it's the sound system, but I would really like to hear what people are saying. And I did just have my ears checked, so I don't think it's me. My joy, of course, is in being here this morning. This church has been a joy to me for close to 50 years. And my children were all married here, went to Sunday school here, and it's a joy to see so many of the faces that I remember. I haven't been able to come for quite a few years now, but it's a real joy to be back. And I would like to thank everybody who had a part in keeping this church functioning in all the times when I was not able to contribute very much of anything except prayers. Is it okay to say prayers in here? But, and it's not just your faces. There's so many things that bring back memories of people who did contribute to the church. There's our lovely banners. There's the tapestry behind me. And so thank you all who kept the church flowing for all these years and who were here to make it a functioning church. Would you believe there were close to 100 children in the Sunday school at one time? We not only had Sunday school teachers, we had a Sunday school superintendent to oversee what we teachers were doing. So beautiful memories and hopes for the future and prayers for the future. Thank you.
That's all right. I think maybe we're shared out from our water service, and we're going to light one more candle for those joys and concerns that we are still holding inside. Patty's going to play something for the offertory. This is a time when we can share gifts and donations for the continuance of this church. As Peter always says, if this is your first time here, then please don't feel any pressure. But that's what we're going to do. The title of this morning's message is Great Snakes. And right now, before I even start, I've got to be upfront about this. At no point during this service am I going to handle a live poisonous snake. I am not a snake handler, nor am I a snake handler's son. Farther back than that, I don't know. But I do know that I'm descended from a long line of people who had the good sense to live long enough to have and raise children. So I'm going to presume that provoking poisonous snakes was not their weekend pastime. Or maybe all of my ancestors were snake handlers and they were just really, really good at it. And when I talk about snake handling here, I'm not talking about zookeepers and forest rangers, swamp tour guides, and carnies. All of these people have a perfectly legitimate vocational reason to deal with snakes. I'm talking about snake handling churches. How many of us are familiar with this? All right. How many of us grew up in a snake handling church? Oh, okay. just checking. Snake handling churches, or as they more commonly call themselves, the Church of God with signs following. The signs in this case being that members will speak in tongues, drink strychnine, and handle live rattlesnakes and other poisonous serpents. If the person does not get bitten, it is a sign that they are full of the Holy Ghost. If a person gets bitten and survives, it is a sign of divine healing, although survival often entails the immediate removal of a finger or two. Amputations that must be carried out without the assistance of trained medical professionals, since that would be a sign of disbelief. And if a person dies of snake bite, it is not a sign of a lack of faith, but it is clearly a sign that it was that person's predestined time to go. Just to be clear here, as Unitarian Universalists, it's important that we respect all religious traditions. And I definitely do respect the powerful faith it takes to dare the Holy Ghost to save you from a terrified rattlesnake that you're wrangling in a room full of people who are loudly speaking in tongues or whatnot. I know what you're thinking. Snake handling is not so much a demonstration of faith as a demand for proof. Proving that Charles Darwin was right about incompetent members of a species eliminating their genes from the pool. But there is no statistical evidence that snake handlers are less likely to have children. Actually, snake handling seems to be hereditary. You know, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to, like, I'm not laughing at this. There's just been some funny stuff going on in my life lately. Okay. All right. All right. Pentecostal snake handling began spreading through Appalachia about 100 years ago. There's some debate about whether it first started in Tennessee, Georgia, or Alabama. Maybe it sprung up simultaneously and independently in multiple places. There is a quote in an addendum to the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus says, "And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils, speak with new tongues, they shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick and shall recover." Most Bibles preface this quote by saying that it was not included in the earliest manuscripts of the gospel and is probably spurious. But I guess it seems harmless to include it anyway because of the unlikelihood that anyone would take it seriously enough to get themselves killed. By the mid-20th century, snake handling had become such a fashion that the state of Georgia declared it a penalty, a felony under penalty of death in 1941. This obviously didn't apply to people who got killed, but if the Holy Ghost protected you from the venom, they would put you in the electric chair. But Georgian juries would refuse to convict, and so they gave up the law in 1968 when they had bigger things on their minds, mainly testing their faith in American colonialism by sending their sons to the snake-filled jungles of Vietnam. These days, the right to bear snakes in church is a protected religious liberty. Actually, snake handling Christianity is somewhat in decline. There are only about 125 active snake handling congregations today. That number might be a bit low. Snake handlers tend to be private people and not necessarily the most internet savvy. Or that number might seem high if we consider that while we are sitting comfortably in this snakeless sanctuary, 125 people might be testing their faith by wrangling rattlesnakes at this very moment. While modern biblical scholars widely agree that the snake handling quote in Mark's gospel was probably tacked on as a later addition, the troubled relationship between humans and serpents appears in some of the earliest texts of the Bible. In the biblical books of Job, Proverbs, and Isaiah, which are probably some of the oldest texts of the Bible, God sets out to create the world from chaos and must first defeat and dismember a great serpent called the Leviathan. This primordial battle echoes similar snake fights in Mesopotamian and Egyptian mythology, and likely preserves the most ancient Israelite beliefs about creation. There are many creation stories in the Bible. The youngest creation story in the Old Testament is the opening chapter of the Bible. Since the priests who got the last word on creation put their version first to make it the most authoritative. In the 7-day creation story, in the first chapter of the book of Genesis, God divides the swampy chaos into sea, land, and sky, and then on the 5th day created sea monsters and blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters in the seas." Then God creates land creatures, classified as cattle and creeping things and wild animals of the earth. So if we're reading the Bible sequentially and snakes haven't started creeping yet, that happens later, I guess they'd be initially classified as a form of cattle. All of that can get pretty confusing. The most famous snake story in the Bible is in the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis, where the serpent encouraged Eve to eat of the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge. God had warned the couple that if they ate of the tree, they would immediately die, and it's so serious that God actually says it twice. He says, "You will die, just to get the point across. Then God walks off, and this snake walks up to Eve. Remember, this was before it got cursed to crawl on its belly, and said, "If you eat of that fruit, you will not die, but your eyes will be opened and you will know good and evil." And Eve said, "Holy crap, a talking snake." Actually, the Bible doesn't report what she said, just that she and Adam ate and their eyes were opened and they realized that they were naked. My son Malcolm recently asked me, "Wasn't it the devil who tempted Eve?" And I said, "Well, no, the Bible never says or implies that it was the devil, just an ordinary talking snake. And actually, the snake told them the truth about what would happen. God was bluffing with that death threat. And they called the bluff, and then what happened was exactly what the snake said would happen, and then God got mad and kicked them out." It's kind of a wacky story. The story of the fruit, followed by one of the most comical moments in the Bible. Because when Adam and Eve have eaten the fruit, they hear God walking up afterward, and they hide. And God can't find them and has to ask where they are. And then when they come out, God has to ask them what just happened while he was away. Because apparently this was before God's omnipotence and omnipresence had fully activated. Maybe God was on his way to eat from the tree of knowledge himself. Maybe this was part of what made God so mad, since the serpent knew the secrets of life and death, good and evil. Clearly he had been eating from both trees. Anyway, God curses everyone. The snake first, who loses its ability to walk upright. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true. The skeletons of certain snakes, including pythons and boas, still retain a vestigial pelvic bone. So apparently these did, at some point, have legs and lose them. So God curses the snake, says, from now on, you're going to crawl on your belly. And he goes on, cursing the snake at some length, which again is strange because snakes don't have ears. But maybe they used to have them and lost that too as part of the curse. Now I'm trying to imagine like what the snake would look like with these. The snake is not cursed with losing the ability to speak to people, but God decrees an enmity between humans and serpents, and so they don't want to talk to us anymore. When it comes to the Bible, all things are possible. So I guess it shouldn't be such a surprise that the talking snake in Genesis is not the strangest serpent story in the Bible. There's also that story in which Moses goes and tells Pharaoh, let my people go, and then gets into a contest with the high priests of Egypt who call upon the Egyptian gods to turn their walking sticks into serpents. And then Moses throws down his walking stick, which turns into an even bigger snake and eats them. The oddity of this story is not just Moses getting into a public snake measuring contest. It's that the Egyptian magicians actually perform a miracle. You'd think that the Bible would discredit the Egyptian gods. You'd think that the Bible would say the Egyptian gods are fake and cannot transform things. But it doesn't. It only says that Israel's God can produce a bigger and more aggressive snake. Some commentators say that the Egyptian priests' rods were snakes all along, trained to stand stiff like walking sticks. But that only makes the Egyptian priests seem more impressive. But what tops even that as the strangest biblical snake story comes later. After the Hebrews have escaped from Egypt and received the Ten Commandments and wandered a while in the wilderness, eating some of the food that falls from the sky. Nobody knew what the food was. They called it manna, which in Hebrew literally means, what is this? Some scientists propose that it was some form of desert algae, or aphids, or insect secretions, or some kind of edible bird droppings. Whatever it was apparently kosher. And they say 2 million Hebrews lived on it for 40 years. Apparently it was all right, but kind of boring as a diet. And when some people complained about the taste, God punished them by sending fiery serpents who bit and killed a bunch of people. When Moses spoke to God on behalf of the people, God did not take back the plague of poisonous snakes. Instead, God told Moses to make a bronze statue of a snake winding around a pole, and whoever looked at this would survive the venom. Apparently, no one was concerned that the Ten Commandments strictly forbade worshiping carved images, a crime punishable by death, snakes on fire was the more pressing concern. It's one of those classic damned if you do, damned if you don't moments in the Bible. Even God seems to have temporarily forgotten that commandment. The brazen serpent doesn't get mentioned again in the Bible for another 500 or 600 years. And then, in Israel, King Hezekiah decreed that the Jerusalem temple should be cleansed of all of its naked goddess statues and phallic pillars of Baal. And he also declared, it's really time we got to stop people from burning incense in front of Moses' old snake statue. And so he broke it to pieces. Apparently, the snake statue had been hanging out in the Jerusalem temple for 300 years without anybody wondering if it's a sin to worship this thing. Anyway, the snake was finally gone from the Jerusalem temple. But its story does not end there. Michelangelo painted it on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome, where people can still look upon this image and pray for a break from snake venom. Oddly enough, this biblical snake on a stick is not the origin of the pharmacy symbol with the two snakes entwined around the staff with the wings. That comes from an old Mesopotamian symbol that was later adopted by the Greeks. Now, there are numerous legends attached to this symbol, the most fabulous being that of Tiresias, a young man who accidentally was out walking and witnessed two snakes copulating, and then unaccidentally struck them with his staff, killing the female. And angered by this, Hera, the queen of the gods, turned him into a woman. And he lived like that for 7 years, getting married and having children and doing women's things, until one day she was out walking and saw two snakes coiling, and this time, accounts vary, either killed the male or killed both of them or just left them alone. But whatever it was, for this, Tiresias was transformed back into a man. And having looked at love from both sides, he was given special insight, which came in especially handy when he was later struck blind by the gods. Oh my goodness, you know what? It's not in here, but I'm just going to go ahead with this. So the Greek myth is that Zeus and Hera got into an argument about whether men or women could derive more enjoyment from, like marital relations. And they were arguing about this, and they said, oh, there's only one person we can ask, Tiresias, who has been both a man and a woman. And so they go to him, and they say, which one, men or women, can have more fun during sex? And Tiresias, who had been both, said, if you broke, physical enjoyment into 10 parts, he said, men have 1 part and women have 9. And then the gods got angry at him and struck him and made him blind. So it's one of those just Greek myths. Anyway, the staff with the two snakes around it was later picked up by the Greek messenger god Hermes. But he's not a god of healing. He's more like a traveling salesman. And it turns out that the snake as a sign of healing is supposed to be one serpent wrapped around a stick, the rod of the healing god Asclepius. But pharmaceutical marketing firms find the two snake symbol to be doubly effective because doctors never say, take one of these and call me in the morning. At least they don't say that while prescribing snakes. All right. Last month, someone asked me what my next sermon was going to be about. And I said, well, I've just preached about cows, and I've just preached about rabbits. And he said, you should do snakes. And I said, yes, and I'll call it Great Snakes. Because have we ever heard this expression before, great snakes? Because as a collector of antique slang, I'm concerned that the expression great snakes may be facing extinction. And it bothers me because of the great exclamations, which include Great Scott and Great Caesar's ghost. I find great snakes to be the most evocative, even in its abbreviated form. The original expression, I've recently learned, was great thundering snakes. And I was excited because the snake gets such a bad reputation in religion. The Eden story is the most famous serpent narrative in the world, but really, that story seems to be part of an ancient smear campaign to discourage people from their positive associations with snakes, women, and trees. Obviously, it was a very effective campaign, since most of my college students can't even conceive of the notion that snakes, women, and trees were once venerated in religions, and that snakes had long been a symbol of wisdom, immortality, and the protection of goddesses. But now we're running out of time. So the serpent as a positive religious symbol will be the topic of my next sermon, which maybe I'll call Great Thundering Snakes, so that we know that I'm not just doing this one again, even though this one should have been called Great Thundering Snakes, because this one had snakes on fire. In all my years of preaching here, I've never ended a sermon this way, but I'm going to just try that anyway. To be continued. All right. I know there was so much I could have accomplished in this sermon, but then once I got the idea, I was like, oh, I should start this with a brief introduction to snake handling churches. Like, once you start researching about that, you just don't know when to stop. Please join us for hymn 131, Love Will Guide Us. Do we have any announcements today? I've got a very exciting announcement, at least an announcement that I'm excited by. In about a half hour after we do, like, coffee hour and some social time, I'm going to be offering a brief adult education session about the creation stories in the biblical book of Genesis, and we're going to look at the 7-day creation story and the Garden of Eden creation story, actually as two separate stories that have kind of come from different times and have separate meanings, and we're going to kind of disentangle some of what was going on in the world at the time and what is it that brought these stories about. I think this will be an interesting topic. As you may know, I don't talk or teach about the Bible much, but that's what I did my master's degree in, and we'll be talking about it not in a devotional way, but just looking at what are these words on these pages and what are they actually saying. I hope you will join us for that. Are there any other announcements? All right. Together, we have sanctified this space. If you have found strength and comfort here, share some out there. They need it. Remember that you are blessed, and you are a blessing, and you are not alone. Please join me for the words of extinguishing the chalice, also printed in your leaflet. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I did not prepare a postlude because I couldn't find any slithering songs. But I do remember, it popped into my head, having grown up on a farm in the middle of a field, we had a lot of snakes. And my mother used to recite this little poem. As I was going through the garden gate, I met a little garter snake. So I shared some of my jelly cake and made his little tummy ache. So take that, snake. Oh, okay. What's that? Oh, sure. I love that.